For decades, Meryl Streep and Don Gummer were believed to be one of the last unshakable love stories in Hollywood. A marriage untouched by scandal, fame, or time.
To the public, their
But
union
behind
carried
the
a
quiet dignity of their
no
relationship,
headlines, no
a single
dramatic
turning
interviews,
point shattered
no chaos.
everything she thought she could
But
hold
behind
together.
that calm,
Something
shifted.
happened that forced Meryl to
Something
make the
small
most
at first,
painful
so
decision
subtle
of her
that even
life,
the people
ending a
closest to them didn't
45-year
quite grasp
partnership
what was
that once
happening.
defined her sense of home.
And that quiet
The truth
turning
is
point
far
is what
heavier than
eventually
what
changed
headlines ever
everything.
captured, and the real
Meryl
story
Streep spent
reveals a
nearly
side
half
of
a century
Meryl Streep
believing her
few
marriage
have
was her
ever
anchor,
seen.
the place she could
The
return
day
to no matter
everything
how
quietly
overwhelming Hollywood
changed.
became.
Meryl
But
Streep
in
and
the
Don
years
Gummer
leading
had
up to
spent nearly half a
2017,
century
the
navigating the
foundation
unpredictable
slowly,
tides of
silently
Hollywood
changed.
while fiercely
Not
protecting the
because of one
sanctity of their
explosive
marriage.
moment, not because
They
of
raised
anger or
4
betrayal,
children,
but because
built
the emotional
parallel
connection that
careers,
once held them
hers
together
in front
had
of the
begun to
world,
fade.
his in quiet
When
artistic
Meryl finally
spaces,
accepted that
and
reality,
held together
she
through
had to make the
challenges
most
that would have
painful
broken
decision
many
of her
others.
life.
Yet
That
somewhere
decision
around
marked the end of a
2017,
45-year
a
partnership
private
that had
shift
defined her
began,
understanding
one
of home.
subtle enough that even
To
close
understand how
friends
the
did not
shift
fully
happened,
understand
you have
it
to
at
understand
first.
the life they built.
This wasn't a dramatic
Meryl Streep and
explosion
Don
or a
Gummer were
public
never a
rupture.
loud couple.
It was quiet,
Their love wasn't
slow,
made of red
and
carpet
deeply
kisses
personal.
or tabloid stories.
By the time the world saw them
Instead,
together
it was
at the
built on the small
2018 Academy Awards, the
shared
truth was
understanding,
already set in
mutual
motion.
respect, and an
The
agreement
romantic
that privacy
core of
was
their
more
marriage
important
had
than
ended,
publicity.
but they kept
They
the
raised 4
decision
children.
entirely to themselves.
They kept their careers
For more
balanced,
than 6
hers in the
years,
blinding
they
glare
lived
of fame,
separate
his in
emotional
quiet
lives, even
studios
while
and
sharing
galleries where he
children,
shaped metal and
grandchildren,
stone
and
into art.
decades of memories.
And for a long
The
time,
shocking
that
part
balance worked
was that
beautifully.
Meryl continued to
They
wear
met in
her wedding ring,
1978,
a symbol
during one
she
of the darkest
refused to
seasons of
remove
Meryl's
even
life.
during official events,
She had just lost
interviews,
John
and red
Cazale,
carpets.
the man she loved deeply,
In
to
October
cancer.
2023,
His
she
death
was
shattered her,
photographed at the
left her
Princesa
grieving
de
both
Asturias
personally and
Awards in
publicly.
Spain, her
Don
ring
Gummer
still in
stepped in
place,
not as a replacement,
leading fans
but
and
as
reporters
support.
to assume nothing had
As
changed,
someone who offered
but
stability,
everything had.
compassion, and a
When People
kind of calm
magazine
she
finally
desperately
confirmed
needed.
the separation in
6
late
months later,
2023,
they were married.
the public was
It
stunned.
was quick, yes,
But the statement
for Meryl,
revealed
it was a
something
lifeline
even
at a
more
moment
unexpected.
when she wasn't sure how
The
to
split
rebuild
had
her
occurred
world.
years earlier,
And
long
for years,
before anyone
that foundation
realized.
held strong.
According to
But
her
long marriages
representative,
don't break
Don
suddenly.
Gummer and
They
Meryl
shift
Streep have
slowly,
been separated
silently,
for more
over the
than
course
6
of years.
years. And while
That's
they will
exactly
always
what
care
happened
for
here.
each other, they have chosen
Around
lives apart.
2017,
The
first real
timeline
signs
placed their
appeared.
separation quietly
Meryl
around the
bought a
time they
mid-century
sold their
house in
longtime
Pasadena.
Tribeca penthouse in 2020.
It wasn't unusual
And when
for an
Meryl
actress
moved
with her
into a
schedule to have
mid-century
second
Pasadena
but the
home,
distance
she purchased
between
in
them, the geographically
2017.
and emotionally,
What
began
triggered the
growing.
moment Meryl finally
She was
accepted the
working
end of her
projects
marriage
across the country,
wasn't a scandal or
constantly
betrayal.
surrounded by film sets,
It was the
interviews,
realization
and red
that the
carpet
emotional
obligations.
distance had become irreversible.
Don remained deeply rooted in his
Something
artistic
inside
world,
her shifted,
a world that operated
and once it
at a
shifted,
completely different
there was
pace
no
from
turning
hers.
back.
Bit by bit,
A
they
marriage
began
built
living in
on
parallel
privacy,
rather than together.
balance, and silent
3
sacrifice.
years later, in 2020,
To understand
they
the
sold
depth
their
of what was
longtime
lost,
Tribeca penthouse,
one must look
a
back
space
at
that
how
had been
Meryl
their home
Streep
base
and
for
Don
over a
Gummer
decade.
built one of the most enduring
It wasn't the
partnerships
price or the
Hollywood had
apartment
ever
itself
seen.
that mattered.
They met
It was
in
what the sale
1978
represented,
under
the
heartbreaking
closing of a long chapter
circumstances.
they had built side
Meryl
by
was
side.
grieving the death of John
Even then,
Cazale,
the
the
public
love
had
she
no
thought
idea
she would
anything
spend her
was
life
changing.
with, who had just passed
Meryl
away
still
from
wore her
lung
wedding
cancer.
ring.
Don
She still
Gummer
appeared
entered
at
her
events with
world
quiet
not as a
confidence.
replacement, but
There
as
were
a
no
steady
rumors,
presence.
no hints of trouble,
Someone
nothing
who
for
offered
fans to
stability,
suspect.
compassion,
And
and the
that's
gentleness
exactly how they
she
intended
desperately
it.
needed during a time
Even
when her
when she
life
attended
felt
the Princess
uprooted.
of Asturias Awards in
They
Spain
married
in
just
October
6 months after
2023,
meeting,
the
and
ring
for
was
decades,
still on her finger.
their bond seemed
To the world,
unbreakable.
it meant the marriage was intact.
Unlike many celebrity
To
couples who
those who knew
struggled
the
under
truth, it
constant
meant
public
something else,
examination,
respect.
Meryl and
The
Don
ring wasn't
constructed a
about
life
pretending
defined by
everything was fine.
quietness. She
It
was
was
the
a
face
symbol of the life they
recognized
built,
everywhere,
a life that
collecting
deserved to be honored
Oscars,
even after
delivering
the shape
historic
of their relationship
performances,
changed.
shaping the landscape of
The
American
news of their
cinema.
separation finally
He
came
was
later
the
that month,
sculptor,
in a
the quiet
carefully
architect,
worded statement
whose
to
metal
People
and
magazine.
stone installations
It
appeared
stunned the
in
public,
galleries from the
not
early
because they
1970s
separated,
onward.
but because of one line. Meryl
While she
Streep and
stood
Don
under
Gummer had
blinding
actually
lights
been
and global
separated for more
scrutiny,
than 6
he
years.
worked in shadows,
6 years
content
of
with a life
quietly
built
living
on
apart.
craftsmanship friendship,
6
solitude,
years of family
and discipline.
gatherings, birthdays,
But
holidays,
this balance
and
wasn't
public appearances
effortless.
handled with grace
Meryl
and privacy.
often spoke about the emotional
6 years
demands
of
of
choosing
raising
dignity
4
over
children
drama.
while sustaining a full-time
According to
acting
sources
career.
close to them, their
In a
split did not come
2002
from
Vogue
anger or
interview,
betrayal.
She described
It came
marriage
from the
as an
realization
enormous
that they had reached the
negotiation,
natural
one
end
that
of their
required
romantic
goodwill,
partnership.
compromise,
They still
and
cared for
knowing when
one
to
another.
remain silent.
They still supported
I have a
one
holistic
another.
need to work
But
and to have
emotionally,
huge
their
ties
lives
of
had
love in
moved
my
in different
life,
directions.
she said,
To
revealing
truly
how she felt
understand the weight
torn
of
between
Meryl's
two
decision,
worlds,
you have to
both
look further
essential
back
to her
to the early
identity.
grief that shaped her
Motherhood pushed her
understanding of
to
love.
physical and emotional
Her
limits.
relationship with John
Her
Cazale
oldest daughter,
left an
Mamie,
imprint that
was
never
born in
truly left her.
1983. Grace
Losing
followed
someone
in
that deeply, that
1986,
young,
Louisa
changes the
in
way you connect with
1991,
people for the rest
and
of
her
your
son
life.
Henry in
Meryl
1979.
carried that loss with her into every
Between
relationship,
pregnancies,
including her
filming
marriage to Don.
schedules, and
And
Don's
as her
evolving
marriage
art
began to
career,
drift,
the
she
marriage
recognized
required
a familiar
constant
emotion, an
recalibration.
emotional distance
Meryl
that
often
reminded her of
admitted
the
that
ache
being
she
a mother was
experienced
harder
decades
than
earlier.
acting. Acting
But
brought
this time,
applause,
the loss
but
wasn't caused
motherhood
by
brought
tragedy.
relentless uncertainty.
It was caused by
Still,
time.
the marriage
There
endured
comes a
because they
moment in
created
long
boundaries that
relationships when the two
protected
people
them.
inside them
They rarely
realize
gave
that they have
interviews
changed,
about their
but the
relationship,
relationship
rarely
hasn't changed
attended
with them.
Hollywood events as a couple,
Meryl and
and
Don
kept their
reached
private
that moment
life
quietly.
insulated from media narratives.
There was no fight,
For
no
decades,
scandal, no bitterness.
this strategy worked flawlessly.
Just acceptance.
But the same wall that
Acceptance
protected
that the
them for
rhythm of their
years
lives no
eventually
longer
became
matched.
the barrier that trapped
Acceptance
them.
that the
Two
love that
people
once
living
connected
parallel
them had
lives,
shifted into
drifting
something
further
gentler,
apart without
something
the world
different.
noticing.
Acceptance
The
that
slow
letting go
drift,
would cause less
when
pain
two
than
lives
forcing something
quietly
that no longer
separate.
fit. Meryl's life
For
as
most
an
marriages,
actress demanded
separation
constant
arrives
movement,
like a
new
storm,
roles, new
loud,
cities,
chaotic,
new
and impossible
responsibilities,
to
new
ignore.
emotional depths.
But for Meryl Streep and
Don's
Don
life as
Gummer,
a sculptor
the
demanded
unraveling
stillness,
came as a whisper.
solitude, long
There was
hours
no
in quiet
explosive
studios.
argument, no tabloids
At first,
circling their
those
home,
differences
no
balanced each
dramatic
other.
confrontation.
But as the years
Instead,
passed, the
the
gap
shift
between their
began as a
worlds
subtle
widened.
distance,
The
something
deeper Meryl
intangible
went into
but
her public
undeniable,
life, the more
growing
Don's world
slowly over
remained
the
private.
years until it became too large
Eventually,
to overlook.
the two rhythms no longer overlapped.
Around 2017,
and
the
that's
first
when the
signs
quiet
emerged
separation
quietly.
began.
Meryl
Their
purchased a
children,
mid-century
Henry,
home in
Mamie,
Pasadena,
Grace, and
thousands of
Louisa,
miles
were
from the
always the
East Coast
priority.
life she had shared with
Even
Don
after the
since the late
separation,
1970s.
family gatherings continued
As
with
filming
the same
schedules
warmth,
took her
but
across
now
the
with a
country,
clearer
and Don
understanding.
remained rooted in his
They weren't
artistic
pretending to be a
routines.
couple.
Physical distance
They were honoring
slowly
decades
became
of
emotional
partnership
distance.
while living in a new chapter
They were no
with
longer
honesty.
moving in tandem.
Even
they
now,
were moving
Meryl
in
still
parallel.
speaks respectfully of
3
Don.
years later, in early
And Don
2020,
continues living a
they
life
sold
far
their
from the
beloved
spotlight, focused on his art.
3,950 square foot
Their
Tribeca
paths have
penthouse
diverged,
for
but the affection
$15.8
remains.
million
Their story
after
didn't
14
end in flames.
years of
It
ownership.
folded itself gently into a
The
different
sale was
shape.
steeply discounted after
A shape
months
built
on the market.
acceptance,
But what
understanding,
mattered
and
wasn't the
gratitude
price.
for what they had
It
shared.
was the symbolism.
And that's what
The
makes their
penthouse had been
separation
their
so
shared
striking.
base, the place they
Hollywood is filled
returned
with
to
messy
between
breakups,
projects,
public
pregnancies,
arguments, and endless
exhibitions,
drama.
and milestones.
But Meryl Streep
Letting it
and Don
go
Gummer
felt
chose
like the
something
closing
else.
of a chapter neither
They
of them
chose to
could
protect
fully
each other.
articulate at the time.
They chose
And
to
yet,
protect their
through
family.
all of this, Meryl
They chose to
continued
protect
wearing
a love
her
story
wedding
that
band.
lasted 45 years,
At the
not by
September
holding on to it, but by
2023
letting it
Princesa
evolve.
de Asturias
Their
Awards in
marriage didn't
Spain,
collapse.
she walked the ceremony with
completed
her
its
ring
course.
still visible,
It
fueling
became
public
something different,
speculation
a
that her
relationship
marriage
defined
remained
not by
intact.
romance, but by
Fans saw the
history,
ring as a
respect,
sign
and
of
the kind of
devotion.
bond that can only
Insiders
be built by
saw
weathering
something
decades
else.
together.
The ring was not
And
about
so
the
the
present.
question remains,
It was about honoring nearly
what do you
half a
think of
century
Meryl
of
and Don's
history.
quiet,
The
dignified
truth was far
separation
more
after so many
complicated.
years?
According to the official
Do you believe some
confirmation released in
relationships
October
evolve rather than end?
2023,
If you
Meryl and
enjoyed this
Don had
story,
already
feel
been
free to like the
separated for
video,
over 6
share your
years
thoughts
by the time the
in the
world
comments,
discovered it.
and
They still
subscribe for more
cared
deep
deeply
dives
about
into
each
the
other,
lives behind
but they had
Hollywood's biggest
chosen
names.
lives apart.